both platforms. We're streaming from a certain software over to the Facebook group as well as YouTube. So I'm just going to check that we're all good because I've got a notification saying that we're actually not all good on one of those platforms. So let me just check. Let's see where we are. Okay, so that's what we're fine. So we should be good to go. We're on YouTube. We're on the Facebook group. Hey, Belle. Good evening. Okay. All right. Now, there's one thing that I need to do. I have a little link for all the Facebook users to click so that I can see your name. It's so much better. And if you've done this before with us, please do it again because this is an entirely different software and it's only one click this time. So I think it'll be less annoying. Hey, Jody. Hey, Ella. Okay, so some people have already done it. Let me see if I can, if it won't cut things out here. Good, okay. Give me 1 second. Facebook users, please click. Yes, so I can see. Okay. You guys, I've just updated the description of this post. Oops. I've just updated the description of this post with a little link for you to click so that I can see your name. Hey, Bianca. Hey, Jody. Hi, Ella. It's lovely to see you all flowing through. This was such a hotly requested masterclass. I put 3 options up inside the bootcamp group, and I really thought that it might be, you know, a bit of a tie, but fussy eating seems to be a big issue. So that is what we are going to focus on today. And I've gathered 3 amazing experts who I've worked with personally with my own children, my own family, and I know that they're going to offer really high quality information for you. So hold your seats. Is that even a saying? I'm sure that's not a saying, but it is now. Okay, I'm seeing. Okay. So I know that I got lots of comments through earlier saying, oh, I really want to see the masterclass, but it's a bit late for me or whatever it was. And so they're going to watch the replay. So I don't want to wait too long for lots of people to join on because we've got a lot to cover. This is going to be a juicy session. And I've knocked my drink over, so I've barely got any. Let me just, my throat's going. And literally just before I went live, I knocked the drink over. So I just have to wait for someone to get home so they can get me another drink. All right. So I've got a new tech to sort out tonight because I've got pre-recorded videos from 2 experts to sort of break in and out of me talking as well. So bear with me if I do mess things up, but I hope that I won't. So how many people here live are inside the No Fuss Nourished Bootcamp that we're hosting right now? This is the bonus masterclass that we're hosting at the end of the bootcamp, but I did open the doors up for everyone on our socials and our email to come on in as well and enjoy the masterclass. So if you weren't in the bootcamp, let us know. If you were in the bootcamp, I'd love to hear from you what you thought. For those, oops, ew, what's going on here? Okay, can you guys tell me, can you see my screen or are you just seeing me? I think you're just seeing me. Is that correct? Okay, lots of people saying yes, they were in the boot camp. Beautiful. Okay, I'm just going to wait to see whether you're seeing my screen yet or not. Just, that's good. Okay. Beautiful, thank you. All right. All right, so de-writing at the side. Okay, yeah, thank you for telling me that, guys. Okay, so we're now at the end of the bootcamp. We just have one more Q&A tomorrow night, and then that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed it. We focused, as a super quick recap, we focused on how to get your kids to eat healthier without them even knowing through the 4 pillars that give you the most powerful health outcomes with the least amount of time and energy on your part. And we spoke about the No Fuss Nourish method that has 4 pillars, remember? I wonder if you can remember all 4 of them. One of them is take the reins, where we talk about how to strengthen you as a leader in your family, and also taking stock of where your family are at, taking stock of issues in the food industry that impact us. The second pillar was easy wins with swap outs, add-ins, and qualitarianism. The third pillar, anyone? It's such a delay that I'm not going to wait for you to pop it in. Power plays, well, maybe not all, but what I believe to be what we are the most deficient in that would give the most powerful health outcomes if implemented. So that covers diversity, extra vegetables, good fats, and fiber. And we're talking about ways to get them in. And lastly, the 4th pillar was family focus and how to strengthen our family and focus on connection before correction, and even connection before telling the kids anything to do with their food. And also how to educate your kids in a way that will be relevant and interesting to them according to what they're interested in and their age. And so I owe you guys some prizes because we had homework for each of those pillars, for each of those videos. And we owe 2 more prizes, and they're both these winners are going to win the 3-month all access pass to the new monthly coaching membership that we're launching. We start on the 12th of September, and we've already seen lots of people flowing through, and I'm so excited to welcome them into our little family and really get to know you over the course of however long into the future, and really take your hand and support you and make sure that you don't get left behind, and make sure that you've just got that one little thing to do each week and that you don't have to think about it. And so the people who are winning that prize tonight are the lovely Sarah Kirk and Katya Prothero. And I'm so sorry if I said your name wrong, Katya, but I've seen both of you in the group really highly engaged and just really loving it. And so I've really appreciated your input, as I have with everyone. And I wish I could get everyone a prize. Oh, Misha, yes, I can see your name. Thank you for your comments, everyone. Jody and Belle, that's so nice to hear. I love bookending each day. Yes, isn't bookending a powerful concept? Totally takes the pressure off school lunches. I love it. Okay, so last thing to mention before we head into this masterclass is a reminder that the videos come down on Thursday evening at midnight. That's when access to the core content videos comes down. Q&As will be available indefinitely inside the Facebook group, as will this one. But the core content videos will go down at Thursday midnight, and that's also when the doors close for our foundation memberships that are only $20 a month compared to what they will be in the future, starting at $30 and keeping on going up as time goes on. And if you join as a foundation member, you stay at the $20 forever, even when we do price increases in the future, which will happen. So if you are at all interested, now's the time to jump in before midnight Thursday. Oh, you're welcome, Sarah. I'm glad you're here. Yay, Sarah's here. Is Katya here? Can't wait to hang out with you, Sarah. All righty, guys. Okay, so tonight is obviously the masterclass on fussy eating. And it's an example of what we'll do if there's a 5th week in the month. Because you know how sometimes there's more than 4 weeks in the month. We've only got 4 pillars. You know, I forget how many 5th weeks of the month there are in the year, but there's quite a few. And that's when we get to do a deep dive, because weeks 1 to 4 are going to be light. Like I'm talking 5-minute videos, or here's your downloadable of all the things you can say to your kids about broccoli according to their age. You know, just really light, quick things that you don't have to sit for half an hour and watch a video. It's just manageable, fits into your lifestyle. Whereas the 5th month of the week is when we do a bit of a deep dive on whatever's needed. And so you can see in the bootcamp, I reached out to you guys to say, what do you need? You guys said fussy eating. So this is what we're doing the deep dive on today. So that's a bit of an example of what we can do in the 5th week. So shake it off. If you're here, you likely have someone in your family who are quite picky or have strong preferences with what they eat. And there are even some families out there who are struggling with flat out food refusal, which is next level, and we'll talk more about that. And so fussy eating can be super taxing. It can be very trying on your patience. It can be very trying on even your character. I have felt that. I have felt like, I feel like I'm a good person. I'm a good mum. Why am I treating my children like this? Because I'm so frustrated that they're not eating their food. That they'll eat their snacks during the day. They'll eat their white carbs, or they'll snack on whatever they want or whatever they're comfortable with and confident with. But when it comes to eating the dinner, that typically is the meal, right, that has the most nutrients. It's kind of where we put the most effort in most of the time, with our veggies and the good fats and all the things that we typically like. So the main meal of the day for most Australian families, and often that's the meal that our kids boycott, and it's just so frustrating for so many families around the country. So if that's your experience, please let us know in the in the comments, and tell us your experience with fussy eating. I'm sure that it's going to benefit everyone in the group to see that you are not alone. Everyone here right now, there's 52 people live in the group. There's going to be heaps watching the replay, because I've never had so many replies saying, can't make it, I watched the replay. You are not alone. There are many, many, many families struggling with this. And we're going to tonight aim to give you a holistic approach or a perspective from 3 different experts about some of the common and lesser known causes of fussy eating. And we're going to give you a few strategies to combat it as well. Now, can I suggest that you get yourself a pen and paper? Because like I said, it's going to be juicy, it's going to be meaty, there's lots to digest, no pun intended. There's lots to digest tonight. All right, just checking on the comments. I probably won't continue to go back to the comments a lot, guys, because I will go down the rabbit hole of replying to everyone right then and there. And if there's burning questions, maybe just hold them back to the end. And if we've got time, we can have some question time then, okay? But feel free to chat and, feel free to be in there chatting with each other. Okay, so tonight, to begin with, let's meet our experts. Now, to do this, this is where I get a little bit tricky. And I start. It's always funny when you start a new software program and all right, here we go. We're going to meet 2 of our experts, and unfortunately our 3rd expert really wanted to contribute a video for tonight, but she was not able to in the end. She's got her own project that she's very busy with right now. So I've actually been able to summarize a lot of her principles and teachings, and I'll be able to share that with you from her tonight. Okay, so let's meet Jess and Sam.
Hello, my name's Jessica Donovan, and I am a naturopath and the founder of Natural Super Kids, where we support and inspire and educate parents to raise healthy and happy kids and get to the bottom of some of those really common chronic health issues that so many kids face today: eczema and allergies and ADHD and sleep issues, behavior, mood problems, tummy troubles, constipation. We are really good at helping parents to navigate these chronic health issues, and as I said, get to the underlying cause, which is so important. So today I am here to talk to you about some of the underlying causes that can lead to picky and fussy eating. As I said, I am a qualified naturopath. I have over 20 years experience as a naturopath, and as a naturopath that specializes in kids health, it's one of the most common challenges that is occurring in parents that I work with is that their kids are fussy or picky, and so looking at these underlying causes can be really important.
My name is Sam Gourley. I am a paediatric occupationist based on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. So just so you know a little bit about me and my work here, we have a clinic on the Sunshine Coast, and we work predominantly with kids that have autism spectrum disorder and similar developmental conditions. A lot of the kids that we work with have a lot of difficulty with food, and so I want to share with you a little bit about what we see in the clinic and some of the ways that we help these kids. So
test and get really.
Oh dear, what have I done now? I'm just gonna. What I've done, we've done a little bit of a tricky tech thing here. Let me just. We've cut up everything that people have. Sorry. 1 second, you guys.
As is needed for their nourishment. It's a relatively common occurrence that happens, particularly in the special needs community, and we see kids all the time who come through the clinic with different food preferences.
All right, thanks, you guys. Getting the hang of this, getting the hang of it. All right, so I'm assuming that all worked. I checked my phone, the screen share worked. It's all good. Just give me a thumbs up or something there to let me know that the tech was all good, because that was a first for me. I'm going to so enjoy reading those comments afterwards, you guys. Now, that was Jess Donovan, Paediatric Naturopath, and Sam Gourley, Paediatric Occupational Therapist. Now, the third expert that we are going to meet tonight, I should have left this on, is actually Kirsty Wirth, who's a gut expert, who I have also, here we go, that's Kirsty, who I've personally worked with all three of these lovely people. And I'm just going to read you a little bit about Kirsty. Kirsty Wirth is a teacher, integrative health coach, and a mother of 2 children, one of which is on the autistic spectrum. Kirsty studied a PhD at Monash University, held lecturer and teaching positions, and is a passionate outdoor enthusiast. Her area of interest is, of course, gut health and children, and more specifically, how the correct lifestyle, diet, and supplements can positively impact their gut health, immune system, behavior, and neurological function. Kirsty is the founder of Cultured Wellness, a company dedicated to providing education, knowledge, and products for optimal health, and specifically gut health. All right, you guys. Now, to set the scene, Sam is going to talk about what fussy eating can look like for various kids at various stages on that fussy eating spectrum. Here we go.
The other thing that we often see in the clinic, and this is in not just kids with special needs, but often kids in the community, is if a child has had a bit of a traumatic experience to a certain type of food. Oh dear. I'm really hoping. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to make sure that that I'm at the right place here. I think that I skipped a little bit, you guys. Stay with me. It's going to be like 30 seconds extra time. Sorry. And similar developmental conditions. A lot of the kids that we work with have a lot of difficulty with food. And so I want to share with you a little bit about what we see in the clinic and some of the ways that we help these kids. So, first off, I want to really clearly define for you the difference between what we call a picky eater and a problem feeder. Now, a picky eater is basically a child who develops preferences around food that makes them a little bit picky to what they eat. All children, and actually all humans, develop preferences around food. We have things that we like and things that we don't like, and we start to form those preferences right from very early when we become introduced to different foods in purees or baby food or whatever. We develop these preferences, and as we move on in life, we develop new preferences. Foods that we didn't like before, we start to like, or foods that we used to like, we don't like anymore. Children who perhaps are a little bit more selective on their food might be defined as a picky eater. This is kind of normal. It does happen. I've got 5 kids. Each one of them have been a picky eater at some point in their life. The difference is when we start to see kids who enter a different category that we call problem feeders. So I'm going to refer, while I'm talking about kids who are problem feeders, I'm going to refer to kids with special needs in particular, because there's a large group of kids in the special needs community, particularly kids with autism, who will develop these really challenging food habits that can be quite difficult to manage. So, a problem feeder is a child who restricts their diet so significantly that it affects them having a full and balanced diet, and it means that they don't access as many macronutrients, so proteins, carbs, and fats, as is needed for their nourishment. It's a relatively common occurrence that happens, particularly in the special needs community, and we see kids all the time who come through the clinic with different food preferences.
All right, 3:47, just in case I forget. Alrighty. Now, please help me out just one last time here, guys. That the screen's not shared anymore. We're good? Okay. Stacey is saying that this is my daughter, a problem eater. Yeah, Stacey. Gee, it can be tough, and I'm sure there's more of us in the group that can relate to that. And I think that was just such a great overview that Sam gave of just the varying, like what it can look like for different families, because it's not going to look the same for all of us. You know, I've had kids who have been fussy at various times. Even our youngest Rose is quite fussy right now. And I've actually been lucky enough to find the cause of that. And we're going to touch on that later. And this is the beauty of actually educating ourselves on why our kids are fussy. It's not just a case of, oh, my kid's a fussy eater because they've got a sensory processing disorder. I guess that's just the way it's going to be. We actually can look at why is it causing that issue? Like, why is she fussy? And I cannot wait to share some of that information with you. Okay, so just checking on all the tech. I'm juggling like 6 different screens. Okay, so from an evolutionary perspective, I want to set the scene right from the beginning. And this is one of the teachings of Kirsty Wirth, Gut Guru, who would have shared this tonight if she could. I'm going to summarize it a lot shorter than what she would probably talk on because we've got so much to cover. But going from an evolutionary perspective and then also talking about our fight or flight response. When, let's look at, back in the caveman days, let's just imagine that because our bodies are still wired for that type of lifestyle. When we were back in those days, that process of breastfeeding, which Kirsty goes on to say that is, it's still like the ideal or the perfect way that a child would be born, this natural, beautiful birth and then come out of the birth canal and go straight onto the mother's breast for that. She says, the baby gets bathed in bacteria from both the birthing process and the breast milk. And it creates this really nurturing, safe feeling for the baby. Now, she herself had to bottle feed one of her children. And so she's the first to say that this is not a space for anyone to feel any less than because of the choices that they've had to make. But from an evolutionary perspective, that's one of the beautiful steps and processes that we've gone through. Now, when we get to the age where we're starting to introduce solids or we're crawling around on the dirt outside, as these babies would have, they would have been picking things up and putting things in their mouth and experimenting on what that texture or taste or sensation was. Now, back then, even now, if we were to have a baby and sort of have that baby crawling around in the forest, that baby's going to pick up a whole bunch of dangerous things for it to digest. Lots of the plants out in nature are covered in types of coatings to protect the plant and make sure that the birds don't come down and eat it. Indigenous tribes will always prepare their foods in a way that sheds those coatings. And, we've spoken about that in various challenges that we've done as a process called activation, where we soak and then we dry and then we make it into other things. And so babies will crawl around and they'll pick things up, and they are hardwired to be wary of the food they're putting into their mouth, of the substances. And so they will spit, and that's that reflex of shoving things out of their mouth and, is this safe? Is this not safe? That's a process that is healthy and normal and should be celebrated, that our children are actually becoming wary of food. And what is it? And is it good for me? Is this going to cause some sort of illness? That's the process that even our babies today are going through. And they need to experiment, and we need to give them the space to explore their food, to use their hands and feel it and touch it and put it in their mouth and then spit it out. And we need to give them, we need to have some patience around that. And so often we're in such a hurry that we've plonked the child in the high chair. We've got to be somewhere in 10 minutes. We give them a little squeezy tube and we go boom, 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 straight into the mouth and off we go. And that child isn't then given that gift of that exploration time and that safety of just being quite relaxed and nurtured through that whole experience. So Kirsty says we should celebrate that. And it's about 2 years old that type of exploratory time passes. So it's quite a long time. So 2 years is around that time. And we should be offering children or babies a food 50 plus times. And we're going to talk more about the importance of that as time goes on tonight. But sometimes kids are not 2 when that exploratory stage kind of passes and they're feeling comfortable enough with food. Sometimes they're 6 years old or even older. And that's when we see that they haven't had that relaxed, nurturing time to just really get used to and comfortable with food. And so it has a lot to do with our central nervous system. And so when a child is relaxed, they're exploring and they're going to be comfortable with food. But if they're not, if they're feeling like they can't turn off all the stimulation, or they're feeling like there's fear around the food that they're eating or the environment that they're in, it's going to be a lot harder for them to do that. Hey, Kaya. Kaya's just come back from work. And so some children have never turned off their primitive reflexes. Now, tell me in the comments, have you guys heard of primitive reflexes? Do you know what they are? It's not really something that I had heard of before learning from Kirsty. So it is quite something that's not thrown around very much. There's quite a big link between primitive reflexes and the link between our central nervous system. There's quite a strong connection there. Okay, so actually lots of you have. That's amazing. Okay, Sarah has, yeah, okay, so there's some yeses and some nos. Okay, so the primitive reflexes are reflex actions that originate in the nervous system, and they're inhibited when a child reaches a certain age or as children develop and as time goes on. So the Moro reflex is one that a lot of us will recognize when we see it in a newborn baby, where they kind of go like that as if they're falling backwards. They know to startle and they know to kind of put their arms up. That's called the Moro reflex. And there are others as well. Now the central, oh, sorry guys, just 1 second. Jordan, I tipped my cup of water over. Would you please get me another one? Thank you. All right, let's get that. So the central nervous system interacts with that primitive reflex in a way that we respond to different stimuli happening in our nervous system. And so that can be inhibited by certain parts of the brain developing, like our frontal lobe, or just by the child developing in age. And so some children will still have those primitive reflexes switched on. And a chiropractor, some chiropractors are fantastic at testing to see if those primitive reflexes are still on. And there are some other specialists who will do that as well. Kirsty often tells the story that when she took her son to the chiropractor, I don't know how old he was when she did that, but all of his primitive reflexes were still switched on. Now, her son has had a host of different health concerns, food refusal, fussy eating, that just the list will go on and on, autoimmune conditions, being on the spectrum, and she has beautifully managed that process. And you can head over to her website to hear more about her story. And I can even link, she actually did a fussy eating series of videos in her Facebook group, so I can link you to those if you like as well. But his nervous system was in fight or flight, and so he didn't have a chance to develop his brain properly or effectively as a neurotypical child might. And that plays a huge role in how our body sees food. So we really need to have a look at those primitive reflexes. If you feel like your child is fussy, it's such an easy way to just go, you know what, let's just go and check if those primitive reflexes are still switched on. Let's just make a trip to a chiropractor who knows about that, make a call before you go, and let's just go and see, because that could be quite an easy way to make a powerful change in the way that your child views food and how fussy they are and how willing they are to experiment and let go of the wariness around food. So that's all I'm going to say about primitive reflexes. If it sparks your interest, let me know and I'll link you to that talk that Kirsty did. And bear with me as I try my best to summarize her teachings.
You just speak up.
Thanks for the sippy cup. Yeah. Bear with me as I try to summarize her teachings, because I was thinking that she would actually contribute a video. So I've kind of just had to gather what I've known about what she's taught. So bear with me. Stacey's keen for the video links. Okay, so moving past those primitive reflexes, we're going to head back to Jess and Sam shortly, but there's another cause, a possible cause, that we really do need to touch on before we go any further. And that is assisting our digestive system. If we are stressed, we cannot digest. When we are stressed, lots of our blood runs away from our gut, runs away from all of our digestive systems and goes to our extremities, our legs and our arms, so that we can run away from whatever threat is there for us. And quite often in the past, you might have heard this analogy, I've heard it 1,000 times, but I'll say it very briefly. In the past, that was, if a bear was chasing us or if there was a bushfire. These days, it's more likely to be the everyday pressures and stresses of life. But for us adults, it's our inbox, or it's, we're late to an appointment. For a child, it might be an impending maths test, or it could be a child that might be bullying them at school, or even the slightest little thing that stresses them out that we think is ridiculous. If your child is stressed, they cannot digest. And if your child is in fight or flight mode and they're anxious, they're stressed, maybe they're just fighting an infection, then those primitive reflexes may be turned on. And so you might be there shoving food into their mouth and they're turning their head away like this. They know deep down that they can't digest that food because they're in this fight or flight response, but we insist and we're forcing it into them. And that's when their stomach hasn't had a chance to make the digestive enzymes, hasn't had the chance to make the stomach acid, or they don't have that motility reflex to move the stool down and be ready to digest. So they're not going to pump food on top of all that. There's so much to be said for our digestive system being ready and willing to accept food. And so if we're dumping food into this body that's not ready for it, that hasn't, stimulated all those processes that need to happen, then that food will go in there and it will sit in there and it will be undigested. And we'll talk a little bit about what happens when food sits in there undigested a little bit later on. But it's really important to see what's going on for your child behind the scenes. What are they worried about? What could they be stressed or fearful about? And I'll be interested to know if that's something that's crossed your mind before when thinking about fussy eating for your child. Back to Jess. Oh, I'm getting a notification that we're having connection issues. Let's just make sure that it's gone away. So let's hope for the best. Now, okay, I would love to know in the comments, the vagus nerve. I know that it's been a hot topic of study. It's been a hot topic of, talk in certain circles. Have you heard of the vagus nerve? Do you know what it is? Do you know what its function is? I would love to know. The vagus nerve starts at the brain stem and it wanders all through our body. All through our body it goes. Just make sure I'm scrolled down there. Okay. And its job is to talk with the brain, and it tells the brain if we're okay, is everything safe? And if the answer is no, we're not safe, then the brain will trigger that fight or flight that we just spoke about. All the systems break down. Like we said, the blood goes to the extremities. We can't digest. We can't keep our blood sugar levels in check. Our gallbladder is not going to function correctly, and all those functions. So the vagus nerve is like the control center of our whole body. And there's a term called vagus tone. And if our vagus tone is weak, that's when we will see very slow digestion, no motility, and that peristaltic action that helps us move our food through and digest with ease. And so if that's the case, if our vagus nerve tone is low, then that is another cause for potential fussy eating, because we're sitting on all this food that's not digested and we're feeling awful. Yeah, Kasia, it is a lot to do with the gut-brain connection. Yeah, so some have, some haven't heard of it. And so the vagus nerve can get switched on from traumatic experiences in life. That can be as early as a traumatic birth. It can be as early as in utero. It can be an infection that we're fighting. There are so many reasons why our vagus nerve might be switched on, so to speak. And as adults, when our vagus nerve is switched on and we're talking about food, that's when things like eating disorders come into play. That's when we see mental health issues. We see IBS and Crohn's. And it really is triggered by some type of trauma. And so we really should sit and think, well, was there a time when my 4-year-old who's fussy now was experienced some trauma? Whether I was pregnant, whether it was the birth, whether it was some time after that, what was it that might have been traumatic for my child? And think about that. And then if you do identify that there's a potential trauma there are ways that you can strengthen that vagus nerve, which will then help with the fussy eating. Isn't it just fascinating to learn about all the different functions of our body and how they interact with each other, and then what impact it can have on things like fussy eating and things that you would never have expected. Jody. Jody read that if you engage your gag reflex while cleaning your tongue, it will help strengthen your vagus nerve. Jody, okay, so one way that we can strengthen our vagus nerve is by gargling. Sorry, my voice. It's by gargling, singing. So one of the vagus nerve specialists in Australia suggests that we join a choir to strengthen that vagus nerve. And so, I'm assuming that gag reflex that you're talking about might be similar to the gurgling experience, and so that could well be true. Even laughing, if we see a funny joke or a funny meme or whatever it is that we might laugh at, and we're just kind of laughing on the inside, and we're not giving it a whole body laugh. Give it a whole body laugh. That's the kind of stuff that will strengthen that vagus nerve. And how easy are those solutions and those strategies for strengthening that? So I would like to now that we've spoken about 3 different strategies from Kirsty, being the primitive reflexes, being the fight or flight and the impact that has on our digestion, and then also the vagus nerve, I'd like to now have another listen to Sam. And he is basically, it's quite a short, about a 1-minute video, and he's going to talk about, again, that traumatic experience with food and how important that is to identify. All right, here we go.
That we often see in the clinic, and this is in not just kids with special needs, but often kids in the community, is if a child has had a bit of a traumatic experience to a certain type of food, for example, they've choked on that food at some point, or perhaps that food has made them sick in their lifetime, or they tried it once and it tasted really bad, that will often lead them to having a strong dislike and a strong preference to avoid that food. And this can be associated with a lot of anxiety. So, for example, we had a child in the clinic not too long ago, and he had such a strong aversion to grapes that he could not even tolerate grapes being in the same room. So if he walked into a room and saw a bunch of grapes sitting in a fruit bowl, it would actually cause him to, in some cases, gag. So it's not always quite that severe. Sometimes a child might eat spaghetti bolognese one night and find that it didn't taste very nice. Maybe someone made a mistake and it tasted burnt or whatever. And that could be enough for that child to form an aversion to that certain type of food.
So now, before we hear from Jess, we've touched on some emotional causes for fussy eating. Sam has now sort of come in and backed that up. I now want to shift gears and talk about another reason entirely for fussy eating, and that is nutritional deficiency. And sometimes that it might surprise us because we see fussy eating as a cause of nutrient deficiency because our kids aren't eating as much as we want them to, of certain types of foods we want them to, and so therefore they're not getting enough and they won't get all the nutrients they need, and therefore they'll be nutrient deficient. And while that absolutely might be the case, it can actually be this vice versa situation where a existing nutritional deficiency will actually cause fussy eating. So let's hear from Jess.
When I talk about the first one I want to talk about is nutrient deficiencies, or even low level nutrient deficiencies, so suboptimal levels of nutrients. It doesn't even need to be a full-blown deficiency. And I think if you're a parent of a fussy or a picky eater, you often become worried that your child will develop deficiencies because of the limited foods that they do eat. But a lot of people don't realize that nutrient deficiencies, certain nutrient deficiencies, can actually lead to more fussy and picky eating behavior. So the first nutrient to think about if your child is fussy or picky is zinc. Zinc is so important for kids, and kids have a really high need for zinc because zinc is needed for all growth and development. It's really important in immune health, in neurological health, and so much more within the body. And a zinc deficiency can lead to reduced appetite and picky eating. So zinc is required for proper stomach acid production, and so if there is a zinc deficiency, there can be low stomach acid, which can lead to digestive issues, and that can lead to fussy eating as well. So there's a few different ways that a zinc deficiency leads to and picky eating. So how do you know if your child is zinc deficient? It's not one of those really easy nutrients to test. There are tests that can be done to measure the levels of zinc. You can measure them in a blood test, but it's not the most sort of reliable like an iron test is. So you want to look out for some of these signs and symptoms. One is low immunity. Now this can be a bit tricky to kind of figure out, but if your child is constantly getting sick with all the infections that are going around, that could be a sign that their zinc levels are low. Another really surefire way to determine zinc deficiency is white spots on the nails. So 1 or 2 white spots may not indicate zinc deficiency. It could just be that a child has bumped their nails. But if if those white spots are starting to pop up on the nails, then you might want to think about some zinc, extra zinc in the diet, or supplementation. Kids that have slow wound healing are often deficient in zinc, and with that goes slow recovery from colds and flus. So, if you've got multiple children in your family and one of them just seems to take a long time to recover when they get sick, or a long time to heal when they get a cut or an abrasion or something, then you might want to be thinking about zinc for that particular child. And also just general problems with hair, skin and nails can indicate that zinc levels are a little bit low. So kids who are picky around animal products, the meats, which zinc is found in, particularly red meat, but also poultry, chicken, fish as well. But they eat a lot of sugary foods and processed carbohydrates are the ones that are likely to become deficient in zinc. So you want to be thinking about zinc, not just iron, if your child is not eating a lot of meat. And for parents, families that might be vegetarian or vegan, you want to really, focus on zinc and make sure you're getting plant sources of zinc. So zinc, as I said, is found in red meat, it's found in fish and other seafood, it's found in whole grains, so not the processed white beige grains, but the whole grains, things like quinoa and buckwheat and oats all contain good levels of zinc. And nuts and seeds are really good sources of zinc as well, particularly the green pumpkin seeds or pepitas. So if you're, so these are the foods that you want to be focusing on increasing in your child's diet if you are worried about a zinc deficiency. But if they are deficient, you may need to look a little bit further and look at a supplement. Zinc is one of the most common supplements that I recommend and prescribe as a naturopath because it has so many great functions within a child's body. But when it comes to supplements, I do recommend working with a health practitioner, and that's something we can certainly help you with at Natural Super Kids. We offer online, really convenient naturopathic and nutritionist consultations if that's something you want to sort of delve into.
Isn't that great to hear about the power of zinc? My goodness me, zinc is incredible. And so 2 other quick things about zinc that I want to mention right now. When we're deficient in zinc, it can impact all olfactory. Now that's going to mean all 5 of our senses. And if we don't have our taste or smell, why would we feel like eating? You know, if we walk into someone's home and they're busy making this beautiful meal that is, the smell is wafting through the house and it gets our nose and we think, oh, that smells amazing. I'm so hungry now. I just can't wait to eat that food. If we can't smell or taste our food, doesn't it just make sense that our kids are not going to want to eat as much as they would normally? And so that's one reason why zinc is so important as well. And so Jess mentioned the fact that we can test for zinc levels with a blood test. There's another way that we can test for zinc at home that is quite a nifty little way of doing things. You can get a zinc drink. You can get one half, you can get one even at the chemist and do it at home yourself. Now the zinc drink is disgusting. It's meant, well, it does taste disgusting, and that's the way that we can tell if we're zinc deficient. So if we pop that zinc drink in our mouth, and we can hold it there for a little while, and if it's just foul and we have to spit it out right away, then chances are that our zinc levels are quite adequate. If we can tolerate that zinc for quite some time, especially a child, and they can't really taste it that much, then chances are that we would benefit from some sort of either upping our zinc containing foods or even going for a zinc supplement. So that's a great way of doing the zinc trick. Our kids have done that and it was quite a bit of fun. Now, the other thing, when it comes to nutritional deficiencies, I know that we touched on stomach acid already, but we actually do need a robust amount of stomach acid to be able to digest proteins. And, you know, protein like meat. And so if we're feeding our kids again this, you know, amounts of meat in our dinners or whenever it might be, and it's going into the tummy and it's not being digested because the stomach acid isn't there, it will literally sit there and rot. And I know it's a disgusting thought, but that's literally what happens when we're not ready for the food we're eating and we're stressed and our body's not preparing. And so when we have rotting meat in our gut, which happens, then it releases ammonia as a process of trying to digest. And when we have lots of ammonia, it can make us feel terrible, and it can actually enter our brain and cause us to behave differently to how we normally would. We'll get constipated, and there's no wonder that our child is going to be sitting there saying, I'm not hungry, I don't want to eat, I don't even want to look at meat again, I want to go vegetarian. And there's all these reasons our child may not be wanting to eat. Very briefly, if you've got a young person with reflux now, or an older person with reflux, that the symptom it's commonly misunderstood to be high stomach acid. And so we're given these medications to suppress the stomach acid, but it might actually be a double whammy that we're actually not producing enough stomach acid. And so then we're having this reaction, and then we're putting some medication on top to suppress the stomach acid even more. And now that's just, we need to test for our levels of stomach acid and to think about, you know, what else could be at play here before we either force feed the kids or get some medication or, you know, whatever it might be. And so that's what I hope we're sort of starting to, you know, develop some thoughts around during this session that we have together. Rashi, I actually don't know. I'd have to probably ask Jess that. Rashi asked, is there a timeline for the zinc deficiency showing on nails? She has a couple of white spots near the top of her nails. Is that a past deficiency? Yeah, Rashi, I couldn't confidently answer that. I'm not a health practitioner myself, but my guess would be that if you're not then getting fresh white spots, once you clip your nails and those ones are gone, if you're not getting fresh white spots come through, I think that you probably, it's not really an indication that you're low in zinc anymore, but I would probably go and talk to a health practitioner if you're concerned about that. No problem, Misha. Sarah, does that include loss of hair? Well, I know that Jess, the naturopath, did mention, hair issues, nail issues, all that sort of thing with zinc deficiency. So if someone in your family is experiencing a hair loss, I know that there could be multiple reasons for that. But sure, use that as a trigger to go down to the chemist or to your naturopath and get that zinc drink and just have a play with it and see if it shows anything. All right. Kirsty often talks about the cephalic stage of digestion, and I love to talk about this one too in the smoothie challenge that we run. Now, the cephalic stage of digestion is when our brain looks at the food and decides, yes, it's time to digest. I'm ready for this food. We start to create the saliva, we get the enzymes cranking, and again, the stomach acid and all that beautiful process. And the liver kicks in and shoots out some bile to make sure we can assimilate all those good fats. And this is the whole process that we go through. But it starts with our brain, and that's the cephalic stage of our brain seeing the food and going, okay, crack on. And so we need to, again, be in that rest and digest mode for that cephalic stage to start. And so that's why it's so important that we be mindful when we're eating. I mean, how often do we as adults grab food and then run out the door and we're chugging down a smoothie on the run, or we're, eating some toast as we run around the house doing things. And so that's going to set us up for bloating. It's going to set us up for, difficulty digesting and not assimilating all those nutrients. And it can also feed some pathogenic bacteria because the digestive system is it's just one big tube, right? And if the processes through that tube are not all interacting and talking to each other, then the food's just going to go in one end and then out the other without really doing its thing inside our body. And so undigested food will, trigger that pathogenic bacteria in the gut. And so we're not going to assimilate those nutrients. And so if you have a fussy eater and that's their experience, then it makes sense why they're fussy. So you guys, I'm gonna now switch back over to Jess for 2 minutes. Oh, actually, I'm gonna correct myself. It's actually 5 minutes. She's gonna talk about a second nutritional deficiency that can cause fussy eating. And then we're gonna switch gears and talk about the microbiome with Jess, and then from Kirsty's perspective. And let me just think. Just looking at the time, I might have to skip a section. We'll just see how we go. I'll try to breeze through quite quickly. I won't be as, I haven't even been as chatty as I'd normally like to be, but I think it's important that we get through the meaty content from these beautiful experts who have contributed their expertise to this session. So I'm going to flick over now to Jess, who's going to talk about another nutritional deficiency. Let me know how this is landing with you guys in the comments. I'd love to hear. Okay, share screen.
I also want to mention iron and B12 here. So again, these nutrients are found in very similar foods, well, the red meats particularly. And iron and B12 are really closely linked because they are in very similar foods. So if a child is deficient in one, like an iron deficiency has been sort of diagnosed, it's probable that they'll be deficient in vitamin B12 as well. And what happens if a child is deficient in iron and B12 that links to fussy eating is that there can be a reduction in appetite and more sort of fussy, picky tendencies when it comes to food. So if your child is iron and or B12 deficient, some of the signs and symptoms to look out for, they might be a bit pale in appearance, fatigue and lethargy. They don't have a lot of stamina. One of the really sure signs of iron deficiency is getting tired after exertion. So those kids that kind of can't keep up when it comes to exercise, or they get really wiped out after exercise, you want to be thinking about potentially an iron and B12 deficiency there. If they're weak, they feel weak, and dizziness is a sign of iron deficiency as well. Iron and B12 are really easy to test in a blood test. That's not always easy to do with kids, but you can, get a blood test and get really reliable results as to where their levels are at. So as most people know, iron and B12 are found in red meat, but also green leafy vegetables. B12 is found in animal products such as red meat as well, fish, chicken, and eggs. So again, if there's vegetarian, vegan families watching, zinc, iron, and B12 are nutrients that you do want to be extra careful of, making sure that your child has enough of these vitamins and minerals. But as a naturopath, I've seen time and time again, when we build up these nutrient levels, zinc, iron, and B12, even when there is a deficiency or suboptimal levels, fussy and picky eating can definitely improve just from doing that. So that's really good news. The other underlying cause that I see commonly leading to fussy eating in kids are digestive issues, particularly when there's an imbalance in the gut microbiome, which is so common these days because of our Western diet and lifestyle. We're not eating, or our kids particularly aren't eating great foods that are leading to a nice, healthy microbiome. So when there's an imbalance, when there's an overgrowth of the bad or the pathogenic bacteria, then that can lead to a lot of cravings for the sugary and carb heavy foods, the white foods, the beige foods that the fussy kids tend to gravitate towards. So the gut microbiome imbalance can lead to more cravings and this kind of real need for those kinds of foods. So when we are looking at fussy kids, we always want to be thinking about the gut microbiome and balancing that out. So we can do that with probiotic supplements, and we can do that also with fermented foods, things like sauerkraut or kombucha or cashew cheese, or there's all kinds of different fermented foods that you can get into your kids. It doesn't have to be the cabbage that they might not like in the sauerkraut, coconut kefir. So thinking about some realistic practical ways that you can get more fermented foods into your kids. Coconut kefir can be a really good one because you can kind of add that to lots of different things. But be persistent when it comes to fermented foods, because there is an acquired taste, if you like, that comes with them. So as you get more of them into your kids, you've got to start really small, and as you get more into your kids, then you'll find that they'll start to accept more fermented foods once they get the taste for it, if you like. So that imbalance in the microbiome is really commonly causing fussy and picky eating, and any sort of digestive complaint. If there's constipation, if there's reflux, if there's bloating, if there's tummy pain, these kids are more likely to become fussy and picky because they associate eating with some discomfort. And so addressing digestive issues and that microbiome imbalance is really important when it comes to fussy kids.
All right. Again, fascinating stuff. Okay. Oh, I've got some comments in here saying, yep, that's my 6-year-old. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Okay, so you guys, the studies on the microbiome, Jess was just touching on the microbiome just then. The studies that we have are, we have quite a lot now. I heard an expert say the other day that almost every day there's a new study being published on the gut and its role within our bodies. So even though we're learning a lot very rapidly right now, the study of the microbiome, it's really in its infancy. But really what we do know is that we are walking bacteria. There are some figures that are thrown around, like we're 70% bacteria, 30% DNA, or even 90% bacteria, 10% DNA. But the bottom line is that we are far more bacteria than we are DNA. And all our enzymes interact with that bacteria and that DNA. And so if we've got something going on in our cells, we really need to be looking at that bacteria. And so we need to have more of that dual approach, looking at function and also looking at bacteria together, and they work so cohesively together. And so in our body, in our gut, we have bacteria, we have yeasts and fungi and pathogens and beneficial bacteria, but all these different, this huge array of different bacteria and things in our gut, and they all interact, supposedly well if they're balanced. And we know that we've got pathogenic bacteria in our bodies, but that's completely okay when it's in check, when it's in balance. And so we want to make sure we don't have an overgrowth, an overgrowth of a pathogen or an opportunistic bacteria or a yeast. And so when we actually see that we're eating foods that those pathogenic bacteria thrive off and they feed on, that's when we risk, putting that balance out of whack. And when we put that balance out of whack, like Jess said, that's when that, the bad bacteria will basically dictate to us what to eat. It is incredible to think about how intelligent and how powerful these bacteria are inside of our bodies. And so if we start craving lots of sugary things, lots of carb-based foods, that's a sure sign, but it's a strong sign that we have that imbalance going on. And so if we're craving things like carrots and fresh vegetables and things, then that's a sign that our beneficial bacteria are telling us what to eat. Isn't it just incredible? It just blows my mind. Okay, so I'm going to skip a bit here because it's getting a bit late. But I want to hear, this is going to be about a 3 or 4 minute segment again from Jess about sensory issues. And that's going to lead really well into a couple of minutes from Sam around some solutions for some of those sensory issues. All right, here we go.
And last but not least is sensory issues. So a lot of kids that are fussy or picky will have some sensory issues. They won't like the feel of a particular texture in their mouth. So when you think about it, eating involves every sense. You see the food, you taste the food, you feel the texture, you smell the food, you hear the food being chewed in your mouth. So there's a lot of sensory stuff going on when we are eating. And those of us who don't have any sensory issues or challenges, don't really think about that. But when kids are sensory or have sensory processing disorder or any sort of sensory challenge, which by the way is really common in kids that are on the spectrum or kids with ADHD or kids obviously that have been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, it's really overwhelming for them, just the kind of the natural process of eating. So there are different issues that can arise depending on the child. Some kids will hate lumpy foods, and some won't want all their foods mixed together. Others might prefer a particular temperature, like a hot food or a cold food. A lot of kids prefer like a crunchy texture. Smells can really set kids off with sensory issues, and even the sound of chewing can be triggering for some kids. So some red flags when it comes to sensory issues are things like gagging when they touch, smell, or even taste a certain food, only wanting to eat specific textures, disliking dirty hands or sand or messy hands. Kids with sensory issues often don't like to touch things like sand. Not always, but these are some of the I guess red flags that you want to be looking out for. Not tolerating tags on clothes. Some kids with sensory issues, they don't like to get dressed, to put socks on. They don't like the feel of any tags. They can be a real nightmare to get ready in the morning because of the sensory challenges that they have. And another one is not going through the oral stage as an infant where they put everything into their mouth, or constantly putting everything into their mouth after 18 months old. So there's a real range of different sort of symptoms or signs that can come with this. sensory issues. So sensory issues are neurological in origin. So we need to support the nervous system, and that can really help to reduce symptoms. For best results, you do really want to be working with a health practitioner, because what works for one child is not necessarily the support another child wants. And occupational therapists can be really great when it comes to sensory issues. And at Natural Super Kids, we love to work, naturopathically, and then weave in the occupational therapy, or work that child work with an occupational therapist as well as a naturopath, and we find that they get really great results. So with occupational therapy, it's really about sort of retraining the brain to let them know that things are okay. It takes time, it takes patience. It's definitely not a quick fix solution, but it can be really worth it.
One of the things that we most commonly see in the autism community is preferences for food based around consistency of that food, meaning that, as an example, I'll share with you this. There's a running joke in the autism community that if you ever want a child with autism to eat, give them chicken nuggets. Reason being is that chicken nuggets are highly processed. They have a very consistent taste, texture, smell. Basically, the way that they to a child is very consistent from each occasion that give that food. Very comparatively to, for example, grapes. Grapes can be big or small. They can be tarty or sweet. They can be soft or hard. They can be green or red. There's much more variability in fruits and vegetables than there are in highly processed foods like chicken nuggets. One of the most distinguishable features in children with autism is the way those kids tend to have a strong preference towards predictability. Things that are not predictable tend to be anxiety provoking for those kids, and so often kids develop those preferences around food based on what is predictable and what do I know that I'm going to like, and that becomes my strong preference when it comes to foods.
So just jumping in here real quick, guys. So Jess and Sam have both looked at sensory issues. Sorry, I got distracted by that notification. I thought it was about the lab. So they've both addressed issues around sensory challenges with kids, and now Sam's going to now shift into some solutions that we can try with kids who do struggle with those sensory issues around food. Here we go.
No matter what the child's difficulty is, there's a few key things that you can do to support a problem feeder to expand their food choices. It may also be that if you've got a child that has certain food preferences, you might be able to introduce a little bit of variability so that they can gradually be exposed to new foods. So this might be, for example, a child who only has white potato mash. What you might start to do is gradually, each night when you make white potato mash, you gradually put one sweet potato in, and so very gradually it turns into a sweet potato mash. And then that might be a way that you get that child to start to tolerate, eating a different type of mashed potato. The other thing that we want to do is we would love for children to be incentivized for trying new foods. Now, this is where we actually give a child a reward or an incentive for not necessarily eating a full portion of the food, but it may be just for them to try that food. So to give you a real experience, we had a parent who was really working hard towards helping her child to eat carrots at dinner time. And so we looked at a very simple reinforcement program in that for every piece of carrot that child ate, they got another scoop of ice cream in their dessert. So that was a really simple way to incentivize a child to try carrot more and to have a greater quantity of that target food, because that led to a greater quantity of whatever that incentive and reward was. So that worked really well for that particular boy.
Guys, let me just quickly check in here. I wanted to just pop in and say that Sam's had some good success with rewarding kids with things like ice cream and the desserts that they love. One approach that I tend to gravitate to more is Kirsty's approach, where we don't use the super sugary, sweet foods that are going to damage their gut and cause even more cravings and more fussiness. Instead of doing that, let's actually focus on non-food rewards. I think this is such a great way to go about rewarding our kids for being brave enough to try new foods and encouraging them to step out of their comfort zone. We might even have a sticker chart where when they get up to 6 stickers, they get a trip to the zoo with mum and dad, or they get maybe something smaller that's more manageable to do semi-regularly. But we need to start thinking about what message are we sending about rewarding kids with foods that are just not really, they're just going to be damaging. And every celebration we're pumping them full of it, and every time we're proud of me, you did a great job, now you can have this. Or we need to think about what are some more creative options that we have up our sleeve, and how often are we rewarding with those types of foods. Okay, I'm going to head back to Sam.
Important, and I really want to stress in this quick presentation here that we should not be forcing kids to eat some types of foods. So we may want them to eat their fruits and veggies. We may want them to eat whole foods. We may want we may have a lot of values around foods that we feel we want to pass on to our children.
Okay, I know that it was a little bit abrupt there at the ending, but that was the time that we wanted to cut that. Okay, so did you catch that last bit with Sam? He said it's so important that we don't force our kids to eat. And that would absolutely support also what Kirsty's been talking about around, encouraging our kids not to have, the fight or flight response, having the stress around food, wanting to be nice and relaxed, and being able to digest our food and want to participate in that meal. And so we need to think about, what can we put in place that will encourage our kids to try new foods, that's not going to stress them out. And that's when it gets quite tricky for us parents, right? Because I know I've been there, and we can be so patient for so long, and then we might snap. I have done that, and I have met someone who was, honestly, I sat with this man, and he's an extended family member, and he was one of the most patient parents I have ever seen for years. His son had extreme fussiness, and he was not well. There was a lot of reasons why you want to get this kid to eat, but he was so patient. After some years, there's been a big change in that extended family member, to the point now where he will literally hold his son down and force the food into him, or he has on multiple occasions. And whether he still does that or not, that's not really relevant right now. And depending on how you feel about that, and it might bring up some emotions. But that's to highlight how difficult this can get for parents. And we can really test our character. We can really test who we are and who we want to be as parents. And so this is, an approach that Kirsty recommends. We've spoken about how it can take, 50 to 100 exposures to a food before, our subconscious really will decide that it's safe, and that, we will now accept it. We might even now reach for it. And so really, as parents, we need to ask ourselves the question, have we really offered that food 50 to 100 times? Or did we offer it 6 times and then give up because they never eat it? And that's a really important question to be very honest with ourselves about. And so if we offer our child any food, let's call it broccoli again, because that seems to be the most cliche vegetable that kids won't eat, although it seems irrelevant. My kids tend to not have a problem with broccoli, there's some other things. But if your child doesn't have that piece of broccoli, it's our job to make a big song and dance about it. It's not our job to force feed them there. It's not our job to do as what I've done in the past and say to that child, you're sitting at the table until you eat that food. And if they fall asleep at the table, then you say, you can't eat anything else. You're going to have that for breakfast. It becomes quite a stressful experience. And so what Kirsty suggests that we do, and what I've taken on board with our kids, when I'm in my best self, we say, oh, okay, you don't want to eat that broccoli? No worries. That's awesome. That means there's more for me. And you slide their plate over and you eat their food and you say, thank you. And then you eat it. It's no big deal. And then we offer that same food again over and over and over again until they accept it as a safe food. And we can offer opportunities to touch it, to smell it. And I know I've spoken to our community many times over about using all 5 senses when it comes to offering our kids exposures to a new food. Sam spoke about moving the grapes onto the table if the child will accept it. You know, that kid who walked into a room and would gag if there was a fruit bowl with grapes out. And so they worked slowly to just desensitize the child to that food. And so in the more extreme cases, yes, let's move the bowl onto the table, but not put it on the plate. And then we'll move it onto the plate, but they don't have to eat it. And so it goes on. These types of exposures are so important. Even when you're shopping, ask your child to go grab the pears, go grab the zucchini. They're going to pick it up and touch it and put it in the trolley. That's one more exposure that's going to help turn that I want to say the primitive reflex. I'm trying to think if it's completely relevant in this context, but it's going to turn all that fear off for that food of that child over time. So if we haven't offered our child that certain food 50 to 100 times, is it really about the child? Or is it more about us, not patience or the resilience or the grit to make sure that we keep on at it and that we don't give up on offering that food? Because if that's what, the studies are very clear on us needing that many exposures to a food. And if we're not giving our child that opportunity, then it's less about the child and more about us and what we're doing as the parent. And again, that's no need to make us feel any less than, but that's just cause for reflection and cause for pause to say, okay, well, let's go try that food again and again and again and again until this works. How's this landing, guys? I've got one last concept from Kirsty to share. Sorry, it's not actually just one, but we're really getting on there for time. So I'm just going to dive straight into it. I'm going to really enjoy reading those comments a little later. We do have a Q&A night, so I would encourage you to do put your comments and do put your questions in the comments. And I will sift through them and I'll pull them out and I'll address them at the Q&A tomorrow night so that we're not all here till midnight, okay? All right. We have spoken about the microbiome. We've heard Jess talk about it. You've heard me, relay Kirsty's teachings about the microbiome. In addition to the gut microbiome, there's also an oral microbiome. So there's a whole microbiome system going on inside of our mouth. We have trillions of bacteria there. And just like the gut microbiome, it's this beautiful balance of bacteria and good ones and bad ones and all sorts of things just living in harmony, the good and the bad. Now, when we have an overbalance of the bad bacteria, again, just like in the gut, that's when we see the overgrowth in certain pathogenic bacteria. Be Streptococcus. And that Streptococcus has various strains underneath it, and we might have it in our mouth, and then that's sort of telling us to, have lots of sugar, and when we do that, it multiplies the Streptococcus because that's what it wants to eat to thrive and be well. And then when we swallow, this is key, when we swallow, it goes down into our gut, and it's not meant to be there. That's when we start to also see changes in our gut environment, especially the small intestine. And again, that makes it hard to digest, hard to create that stomach acid and the enzymes. Again, we keep referring back to these things that are absolutely crucial for us to be able to digest and then also want to eat food, which can lead to fussy eating. So we need to think about these things. Now, what you can also do, and Kirsty says that this can actually be quite successful, and I was even surprised when she said it, but she will often ask children, do you feel like there's, that you've got bugs in your tummy and they're kind of making you or telling you to eat certain foods that you know aren't great for you, but you can't help yourself? You can't stop wanting it? And she says that quite often they'll actually say, yeah, like I do sense that, I do feel that. And so, you know, our children can be quite intelligent, and it's such an interesting conversation to have with them. So maybe try that with your kids and see. Now, to improve the oral microbiome, we have 1, 2, 3 strategies. You want to hear them? Sorry, my voice just went a bit higher then. The first one is oil. Oh my goodness, oil pulling. Oil pulling is when we have a teaspoon or a tablespoon of coconut oil, the person is, and we swish it around for as long as we can, up to 15 minutes. That lasts that long initially, especially children. So you're just going to want to put it in there for as long as you can, move it around, and then spit it out. You can make a game out of it. Make it fun. It's gross, so make it fun. And you might need to melt it first to get the child to accept it. Or maybe they'll only want it in a solid form, so you put it in the fridge before you try to use it. So that can be a great way to bring the oral microbiome out of balance and back into this nice rhythm where we're not then impacting our gut microbiome when we swallow too. The other strategy she said to improve our oral microbiome is to brush our teeth in a peroxide solution. So again, that's antibacterial. And so if we have some overgrowths, getting a peroxide solution to, let me check, 3% peroxide and watering it down to 2 to 1, she said. And so then you dip your toothbrush into it and you brush your teeth. You don't swallow it, you just spit it out. And the bonus is that it's a whitening agent for your teeth as well, but it will help to balance that oral microbiome, kill those pathogens, and start to change that state in the oral microbiome. You can also brush with charcoal. That's another fun one for kids because your whole mouth turns black. It's very messy, so do it in the shower or do it in the bath. Instead, you'll get your whole bathroom messy. So that's another tip. The last tip is a tongue scraper. Now, I know that Kirsty at Cultured Wellness used to sell these tongue scrapers on her website, but I haven't checked recently, but you might want to check there if you're interested to get one. But it's kind of like this horseshoe thing with 2 handles, and you literally just scrape your tongue. Now, quite often with fussy eaters, if there's a yeast overgrowth and some other reasons too, you may actually see that they've got this white coating on their teeth, on their tongue. And that can be another reason where we're like, okay, well, that's covering their taste buds. So they're not really going to be tasting a whole lot, and they're not going to want to feel like eating, right? And so that can be a lot of fun for kids, particularly, to kind of scrape their tongue and see all that gunk come off. And it's much more effective than using a toothbrush, which, you know, lots of us brush our tongue with a toothbrush. The tongue scraper is next level. So there are lots of things we can do to improve our gut and our oral microbiome. I'm going to skip a couple of other suggestions so that I can breeze through the last 2 little suggestions and then close up because it's already been quite some time. Oh, nice to have you back, Misha. Okay, I'll be able to read all the other comments. It was just a quick one that I saw from Misha. 2 more, which I think is so easy and so fun to do with the kids. It's not overwhelming, like getting a stool test and looking at the bacterial levels. And, you know, I understand that can feel a bit overwhelming. I've done it with my family or certain members of my family. And although it can be incredibly empowering because you suddenly realize what issues are that are causing havoc with your children and seeing a plan to get through it, which is just amazing. But I know that it can be overwhelming. It can also be expensive. Here are 2 other free ways that you can help your child make sure that you're setting them up for a life where they're ready to digest their food. Okay, the first one is movement. So often these days our kids aren't getting enough movement. They might get up in the morning, sit down for breakfast, get dressed for the day in front of the TV, go sit on a bus or in a car, go to school. They'll sit in the classroom. They might get up and run around at lunchtime or PE, but apart from that, they're not really getting a whole lot of other movement. In the bus again, on the way home, then they might plonk in front of the TV show, whatever it might be. So we can see that the culture for our children sometimes isn't providing them a lot of movement. Now, movement and exercise creates lactic acid, and that really supports that digestion again and creates that robust microbiome. And we need to sort of look at our children's day and consider how much they're moving, because sometimes they might not be moving much during the day, but they're snacking all day on the lunch we've packed for them. They've You know, they're having all the food that they'd normally have, but they're not moving a lot. And so by the end of the day, they've had all this amount of food that doesn't match or equate the movement. So when we're moving a lot, we want to eat more. So we've had too much food, not enough movement, and so then our body's not actually using that motility action with the food through, and we can not be hungry for dinner because we've got so much sitting in there already not moved through, and it can cause constipation and all that stuff. So movement is a number one thing to address. Now, secondly, is sunshine. Sunshine is required for us to live and grow. You know, we might look at a plant, and if it's not getting enough sunshine, it's going to be wilting, right? It's going to have these leaves that are just wilting around, and we're like, oh, okay, we should water it, and then put it in the sunshine, because we just know that that plant needs sunshine. But when we are wilting, we don't necessarily kind of, you know, snap into gear and think, okay, what do I need? Do I need sunshine? Do I need movement? What's happening with me? And so what happens with sunshine is that it actually feeds our mitochondria. Our mitochondria are it's like the power plant for our energy. It's the cell powerhouse. It powers our brain function, our energy, and our ability to grow and develop. And it also, the sunshine also provides that vitamin D, which supports so many pathways in the body and so many, all those biochemical reactions that happen in our body, which is so fascinating. You know, we need vitamin D for lots of those. And so it's a bit of a mismatch with our function if we're not getting enough of that sunshine. So that's it, guys. That's the cause, some of the lesser discussed and common causes of fussy eating. We've spoken about lots of strategies. And before I close up with a little bit of a challenge to look at fussy eating differently as a parent and how powerful that can be to switch things around and put it on its head, let's just briefly summarize and just list off the things we spoke about. To start with, we spoke about the difference, there's so many varying levels of fussy eating spectrum, and what fussy eating looks for your family may not look the same for someone else. We spoke about the evolutionary pathways, the evolutionary perspective, and how we might have those primitive reflexes still switched on. We also might be in fight or flight, and our body's just not able to digest because we are stressed and not making the stomach acids, etc., to be able to digest all that food. We've spoken about our nervous system, which relates to all that. We've also spoken about our vagus nerve and how when we've got low vagus nerve tone, that can affect our digestion. We also spoke about how to strengthen that vagus nerve to assist with a whole range of things, including digestion. We have spoken about nutritional deficiencies in zinc, iron, B12. We've spoken about stomach acid and the cephalic stage of digestion and how it all starts in our brain. And so we need to be ready. We need to be looking at that food and craving it and wanting it, and then our brain switches all those processes into gear. We've spoken about the microbiome in our gut. We've spoken about the microbiome in our mouth and how we can bring that back into balance. And sensory issues, about preferences and how strategies we can use to help our child be a little bit more brave. We can increase that variability, like Sam was talking about. We can incentivize our children with non-food rewards to help them, be brave and reach out. We spoke about the importance of not forcing our kids to eat food, which is so counterintuitive, I know, but super important from both Sam's perspective as a paediatric occupational therapist and Kirsty's perspective as a gut expert, and knowing how stress impacts our digestive system and how it's just impossible to digest if we're stressed. You guys, it's a really, and we spoke about movement and sunshine. So that's a whole lot of content we've covered, and I hope that you've been able to pull out some things that will be really helpful for your family. And again, if you've got questions, I would love to answer them tomorrow night. To close with, and I will have a look at the comments at the end before I sign off, just to see if there's anything I need to look at right now. But I want to close off with a little bit of strategy from Kirsty again. And I'm sure she would have loved to give this to you herself. And I'm sorry if you've seen my eyes looking at my notes so much. And again, if you weren't here earlier, I was expecting Kirsty to be able to contribute a video like Jess and Sam, but she really wanted to, but she was caught up with her own projects and wasn't able to contribute the video. So I've kind of had to teach her stuff on the fly, but I hope I've done an okay job of that. But I want to challenge you. Kirsty is very big on this. She wants us not to get caught up in the labels so much. The label of, oh, my kid's a picky eater, my kid's a fussy eater, or my kid has a sensory processing disorder, my kid's on the spectrum. All these labels, and they're changing all the time. We can't keep up with them. It's so powerful to reframe that into, oh, thank goodness my child is telling me and trying to show me that something's going on. And this needs investigation, and I need to delve deeper into what's going on here. What do I need to do? Do I need to have, dinner time at the family? Oh, sorry, dropping my phone. Do I need to have dinner time at the family table more often and really just set the tone, like light a candle on the table to just kind of put some music on? Let's just get everyone in the mode of digest. Let's just rest and be comfortable, feel safe. Everything that we're doing right here is safe and comfortable, and it's all good. And that can be so powerful in helping our children. We don't want to accept, oh, my child has a sensory processing disorder, so they just can't eat what every other kid can eat. Labels stop people from investigating the real reason why your child has been labeled with this diagnosis. And she's not taking away from the reality of those diagnoses, because she, of anyone, is well aware, it's touched her life very personally with her own son in the most extreme ways. So she says this from a very knowing and wise perspective. But if your child's only reaching for the crunchy stuff, the white stuff, the stuff with no color, the stuff or the plates where they don't want to have their foods combined, that's the kind of stuff where we want to go, oh, okay, there's something triggering this behavior and this resistance in my beautiful child, and they are unknowingly trying to tell me what's going on. What can I do about it? So if we don't work to switch off that state of alarm in our children's bodies, then this state of being might continue on all the way into their adulthood. And of course, there are all sorts of things that could go on negatively if we let that go on forever. So she challenges us not to get so caught up in the label and just see our child for the Am I still here? I don't know. I don't know if I'm still here. Guys, I think I'm still on. Okay, that's a miracle. I am so sorry. I can see there's a bunch of you still here. Thank you for being patient. Okay, so I must apologize. What happened was at some point during our chat together, my laptop's charger fell out onto the ground and I had no idea. So as we were talking, the battery just went flatter and flatter and flatter and it died on me. So I'm amazed that when I turn the laptop back on, you're all still here. So thank you. I was closing up anyway. We've had such a great session together. And thanks, Sarah. And really all those change of attitude and the labeling of fussy eating can take time, and it can take endurance and dedication, all those things. And as a community of parents all together here, it is such a wonderful thing that we have each other and that we can support each other. And for those who are coming through to the No Fuss Nourish Method monthly coaching membership, I'm so pumped to keep on having these conversations with you and to keep bringing in experts and to really dive deep into those issues on that 5th week of the month. And on all those other 4 weeks of the month, we can keep it light and easy and implementable. Okay, I will be able to have a better look at all these comments later because I feel like you guys have been here a long time. Jody said, thanks so much, Lainey. It's been a really informative and valuable masterclass. I'm so happy to hear that, Jody. I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks and what your main takeaway was. I'd love you to comment because I've never run a masterclass on fussy eating specifically before. I'd actually love to hear like what was most, maybe not surprising, but what was most valuable to you that you can take away and think about for your family some more and maybe, implement a change or a strategy. I would really honestly love to hear. So guys, have a beautiful night. Have a good sleep. I'm sure most of us are going straight to sleep. It's been so nice to spend some time. And I'll see you tomorrow night at the Q&A where I'll dig out all your questions and I'll answer them. And if you have any other questions about what we've done during the No Fuss Nourish Bootcamp, I can get to those too. All right. Have a great night. Bye.